Welcome back, and time now for us to take a trawl through what's making news on the international motorcycling scene. And I think we'll begin this week with confirmation that we'll be seeing a couple of new middleweight models from Italian-Chinese manufacturer Motomourini by the end of this year. I saw the concepts in Milan at the EICMA show at the end of last year, and very nice they are too. They're using a CF Moto Source 650 parallel twin that explains the 6.5 signage I saw on the stand showing off the concepts. This same engine has already appeared in Motomourini's X-Cape. Well, that's probably meant to be Cross-Cape, given that it's a middleweight adventure model. It's a good looking bike and has already sold very well in its Italian home market, where affordable, smaller capacity adventure bikes go down a treat. Given that adventure bikes are so popular in South Africa, you'd have to think that this is something that would also sell well in our market. You have to wonder if anyone is looking at bringing this Italian mark into the country. If you've heard of Motomourini, it's probably because you're an older biker. Their heyday was way back in the 1970s, and by the end of the 1980s they were pretty much a spent force. They were eventually revived in 2003 and made small volumes of their big 1200cc V twins like the Corsaro, but one of the many massive Chinese businesses, this time it was a scooter manufacturer by the name of Zhongnen, I think it is. They bought it out in 2018, and now they want to use the sexy Italian identity to sell their products around the world. There is apparently a commitment to keep developing the big 1200 V twins, like the one you see here in the Milano, but the parent company seems more interested in producing the smaller capacity bikes like the two new 650s that will be appearing in street and scrambler versions. New 700 and 900cc twins are also planned for next year. Since we're talking Italian, let's keep it that way and move the focus to Fantic, another manufacturer with a history from 50 years of dirt bike competition and mopeds, and now rebuilding with the help of Chinese collaboration. The company almost doubled its turnover last year despite the pandemic, and is set to keep growing with an expanded model range that includes the full range of dirt models, and for the first time a full-time entry into the World Motocross Grand Prix Championship. Of more interest to us is the road legal Caballero line of scramblers that have been around for a few years now, but are continually updated, with single cylinder models now featuring a 125 in scrambler or flat track form, and a 450 with 40 horsepower that comes in a range of scrambler inspired liveries in the 120,000 rand sort of area. They're not particularly cheap, but they're really funky, and in today's retro inspired world where scramblers tend to be ridden by fashionable people in the big cities, this too is a brand that might have a future in South Africa. While we're on this Italian-Chinese collaboration theme, I might as well mention QJ Motors, which is possibly the largest of all the Chinese manufacturers and is certainly one of the most aggressive in terms of new models. Well, you may remember that it happens to own another famous Italian name in the form of Benelli. Benelli has of course been making headlines because its TRK 500 adventure model is the best-selling big bike in Italy, and it has the new TRK 800 adventure bike that was unveiled at EICMA last year to great acclaim, but will only make it, unfortunately, to dealer floors by the end of this year at the earliest. Well, now they're going to be taking it to the likes of KTM's RC390 with the Tornado 402R that will be, unlike the KTM, but very, very, very much like Kawasaki's Ninja 400, a parallel twin that should give it a couple of horsepower advantage over the orange bike to go with its inevitable price advantage. This Tornado range is expected to be quickly expanded to include a 550 and a 650, possibly using engine technology developed in conjunction with MV Agusta, who will be using a version of the 550 in the smaller of its two new adventure models. On the subject of new bikes, here's a couple that are new, but are also so old that they're being phased out. Yeah, I know, sounds wrong, but bear with me. You may know that Japan has many bike models that it doesn't sell in other markets for a variety of reasons, and you may also know that because they have such strict licensing laws, there's a massive demand over there for machines of 400cc or less. These two new models are the latest versions of Honda's CB400 4s that it's phasing out because of the introduction of the Japanese equivalent of the Euro 5 emissions regulations. The CB400 has been around for many years, and it is being sent off into retirement with the CB400 Super 4 and the Super Boldor. Both models feature the same 399cc inline 4-cylinder liquid-cooled dual overhead cam motors that generate a pretty respectable 55 horsepower up at 11,000 RPM, and both have fairly budget suspension and brakes. Despite this, I'm rather taken with both models and could quite see me having one of these in my garage for wafting down to the pub on a Sunday afternoon. If anyone can be bothered to deal with all the paperwork and privately import one to South Africa, count me in. Count me out, though, of riding too much in Austria, though unfortunately I will be there in July to sample a couple of new KTMs. You might remember that last week we featured a new road calming measure for motorcyclists in France that involves painting some unusual new lines on the road to make sure you don't lean over the central dividing line and scare the car drivers coming the other way. Well, Austria has just announced its own new calming measures, but they're a little more draconian than this, which is perhaps not that surprising when you remember that this is the same country that is in the process of banning motorcycles completely from certain picturesque areas like the Tyrol, where the locals don't like the sound of bikes. The authorities there want you to keep both wheels in contact with the ground at all times, and the penalties for not doing so, whether that be a wheelie or a stoppie, can be as high as 180,000 Rand and include having your bike taken away from you for up to 3 days, presumably giving you a suitable time to calm down from the adrenaline high brought on by your stunt riding activities. If you think you can still have fun within the letter of the law by keeping both wheels on the ground and just doing some skids and maybe squealing the rear tyre a bit, think again, because that is also now outlawed. And don't even think of doing a burnout, rolling or otherwise, because that will also get you nicked and fined. Me and some hugely powerful KTMs in July, yeah. I think we'll ride north for an hour or so and do some exploring in Czechia, where the beer and the fuel is much cheaper and the police aren't quite so keen to hide in the bushes waiting to ruin a biker's entire summer. Thankfully, the South African police can often be reasoned with should you accidentally get some air under your front wheel. Remember, it's not just the beautiful weather and the scenery that makes South Africa such a biker's paradise. And on that uplifting note, that'll be it for this week's episode. We'll be back again with a new show in a week's time. We'll see you then.